Hey, to whoever may need this nugget of encouragement, things will be alright, so quit your worrying. I get it, the odds can stack back against the world, but even consider it such, no, you'll stand firm.
Hey, book dragons! Welcome to another episode of the Spine Bookcast Chronicles of a Bookshelf. Today, I'm speaking with one of my favorite people in the entire world, author Dan Adam. And he has written 3 books, Leaving Earth, New Home, and The Rift. I do that every time.
Every time.
Because the whole series is Leaving Earth.
No, Leaving Home.
Yes.
It's the Leaving Home series, and I specifically did that because the first book is Leaving Earth, the second book is New Home. Put them together, Leaving Home.
Yes. Well, see, I can never remember anything. But anyway, so Dan and I've known each other about a year now, and he's become one of my all-time favorite authors. And he is incredibly talented. And we just did his book release party for the third one in the series yesterday, which I think was a success. And so talk to me about how did you first become a reader and love reading?
Well, I didn't really have a whole lot of friends when I was younger. So growing up, it was me and books. Didn't have TV. I think when I was 8, maybe 9, I got a Nintendo for Christmas.
Yep.
I had 2 games for, I don't know, the next 3 years. So it was
Sure.
the only entertainment I ever really got was books.
Do you have a book that sticks out in your mind as something that started your love of reading?
No, not really. It progressed from the time I was little, reading Dick and Jane books all the way up to, reading Lord of the Rings and Michael Crichton kind of stuff. And then, Stephen King and so on today. So,
When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
I don't know that I ever really had the dream of being a writer. It started in 2018 when I had a friend of mine poke me a couple times about, following a dream and the dream being creative and kind of putting that into writing. And after some prompting from him, I started writing the first book, Leaving Earth. And it just kind of progressed from there. It took me 4 years to write the first book. And then once I finally figured out how to publish it myself, it just, that was it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite book now?
No. I always say that my favorite book is the book that I'm always currently reading. So week to week and month to month, that changes. It's hard for me to not be totally engrossed in whatever book I'm reading.
I get that. You make fun of me because of how into books I get.
Yes.
So when Dan gave me the first book, I texted him periodically with just lots of exclamation points and verbiage. And then when he gave me the second one, I think I read it in 2 days and texted him at 11 o'clock at night, very angry at the ending.
Yes, I'm sorry for that.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. It was something I knew going into the end of the book, as I was getting close to finishing the first draft, and the end of the book kind of leaves you with the cliffhanger of, does one of the main characters survive? Do they die? It's just, I kind of gloss over the whole, what happens to Mike Abernathy, and leave you wondering until the third book. And I actually explain what happens.
The third book is so good. I will say, I really, really loved that you gave each of the characters this is how their life ends out. Yes,
Yep.
Because I hate when you get to a book and you want to know how their life ends out. And sometimes they don't do that. And there's but wait. But I thought you did a very good job with this is what happened to this person. This is what happened to this person. This is what happened to this person. I just really love that about your book. So what's your next project?
So I've got 2 that I'm currently working on. The first is another novel. It's a kind of a culmination. I don't even know if that's going to be the right word when you think about it. But you think of the movie Jurassic Park and Arachnophobia and Cujo, and kind of roll that all into one, and then make a subject of the book bats. And you have some interesting things that happen because the idea is bats, ancient prehistoric bats are found in a cave in Antarctica. And the saliva in those prehistoric bats contains something called a reovirus, which in today's science, they use reoviruses to fight cancer. And the premise of my book is this ancient prehistoric bat they find has such a strong reovirus, it kills 99% of all cancers known to man, but it produces such a small quantity that you really can't do anything with it. So they decide to start, tinkering with science, as everybody knows that never goes wrong.
Not ever. It's always a perfect plan.
So tinkering with science to make the bats produce more of the saliva, which contains more reovirus. Like all of a sudden you're talking about genetic engineering and reanimation of bats that have been extinct for I don't even know how many years, and they escape, and bad things happen. But it's the idea.
That sounds really, really cool.
There is another project I'm working on. It's a collection of short stories. After I read The Fractured Spaces, The Spaces Between Spaces by Lloyd Elmore Jr., he gave me some inspiration to write a short story of my own about some snow.
Oh God, I read that.
We're going to leave it at that. It's about snow. So subject to your fantasies. But the collection of short stories is going to focus on fears. And then it's all each of the stories are loosely related to each other. And so that's second.
It sounds very Twilight Zone-y.
Yeah. A little bit. I was thinking more along the lines of maybe some R.L. Stein.
Mm-hmm.
Each story kind of facing a different kind of fear.
Okay. See, and that kind of, it's funny that you mentioned Lloyd, because he wrote The Spaces Between Spaces, which is the first book I read by him. He's another good friend of ours and another author in the bookshop.
Yes. Hi, Lloyd.
Hi, Lloyd. And his book, The Spaces Between Spaces, I've always said is that if Stephen King, Ray Bradbury, and the Twilight Zone had a threesome, that's the book that would come out.
Yes.
Because so that I'm really interested. I read Snow, and that was messed up. Like, I know you're going to be like Stephen Moffat from Doctor Who and taking things that are completely innocuous and making us all afraid of them.
Good.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant. So is there a book out right now that you would love to see made into a movie? Because I'm a movie freak, and you make fun of me because I'm always like, I know, I love that girl.
I would, and everybody listening to this might already realize it's already a thing. But like Project Hail Mary, like when we read that book a year ago,
so good.
Just the premise, like I would have loved to see it in a movie. And now, of course, they're making it into a movie, so that makes it super easy. But if I had to pick something that I know is not currently being made into a movie, I would have to say Leaving Earth.
I would have to say that too, because I told you from the get-go, when I first read the book and then I read the second one, I remember telling you this should be a movie. This should be a TV series or a movie, because the way you describe stuff, I can see it in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you read, so I was looking for audiobooks, and you told me about Project Hail Mary because I like on The Martian, which your books have also been compared to The Martian. And somebody yesterday said that, what did they say? I can't remember. Something about like your pacing was better than what?
Andy Weir.
Andy Weir, which is a high praise.
Yes. It blew me away when somebody said that.
I think that's such a great thing to hear, though, as an author.
Yes.
Because I love Andy Weir's books. So I have now, because of you, listened to all three of the books. And Project Hail Mary, my husband even loved Project Hail Mary.
Yeah.
And so I'm totally pumped and I think, what did they say, Ryan Gosling?
I think so.
That's going to be so good.
I hope so.
I want to see how they're going to make Rocky and so I was thinking about that when you and I because you had listened to it and I had listened to it. And in the book, because I listened to it, I didn't read it.
Yep.
And they do the noise, the musical notes. Yep. I am really curious to how that would have translated out in the book, which makes me want to go get the book and look.
So I've actually looked at that. In the book, Rocky's speech is denoted as various sizes and notes of different variations for his speech.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's different notes, different sizes, different. There's half notes, whole notes, quarter.
So it's like musical notes are actually written out. I love that.
And they vary in size too. So like that's how he gets the tone across. It's actually almost more specific with his speech than normal human speech, because you can almost see the inflection in Rocky's voice.
Oh,
it's brilliant the way he wrote the speech for Rocky.
Because I remember listening and going, how would that look in a book? That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
I thought that too, and I had to go look it up. So.
Okay, so I was going to go do that. Okay. So is there a book that's out right now that's been made into a movie that you think I would have done that differently, or that, like the translation wasn't done right?
Ooh. Okay, that's a tough one.
I never launched you softballs.
Yep. So 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
The book does a very good job at the end explaining what happens to Dave Bowman, and the movie just kind of like glosses over, makes it very hard to understand what's actually happening to him as he traverses through the monolith.
Yeah.
And it doesn't capture the fact that he's evolving to the next stage of human evolution, like the book does. So that's just one thing I didn't really care for the end.
Yeah. So, what are you reading? Anything currently?
I'm reading a couple things. I've got one more book in The Spaces Between Spaces by Lloyd Elmore Jr. I've got the second one he wrote, Fractured Spaces, sitting on my shelf. I'm working on a Jack Reacher novel.
Which one?
Oh, honestly, I can't remember the title because I've got
all of them.
I've got a dozen of them sitting on my shelf.
Yeah.
And I'm probably 3 or 4 chapters into that one. I'm not very far. And I think there was something else I was listening to on Audible, but the name of it escapes me right now.
Yeah. Is there any book that you have from like your childhood that you would like to see made into a movie? I ask because I always loved A Wrinkle in Time. And so I've never enjoyed what they did with it, on like a TV or anything like that. And so then when they did the remake, I don't know, like what, 2 or 3 years ago, I thought they did such a fantastic job. And I was like, finally, somebody's done a good job with this book. Because that was such a pivotal book for me.
It kind of ties into your earlier question about movie translations of book that weren't done very well, like The Andromeda Strain.
Oh, yeah.
So the book is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And talks about this high level of technology, but then it was made into a 1970s movie that
was awful.
Terrible. I think if they remade it today, it would be much more of a closer approximation to what Michael Crichton was trying to get across.
Yeah. Well, I like Michael Crichton books, and I know you and I talked about this before. It's like Michael Crichton is one of those authors that I really love his movies.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, and I always refer to Congo because it's the best example. I'm not a stupid person, but sometimes his writing, the science...
way over your head.
Way over my head.
Yeah.
And I wish that I were smarter so I can understand it, because I'm sure it's brilliantly written.
Yeah.
And it just... And I'll say that's one thing that when you were writing your books with the second, and I'm maybe not with the second one, but more so the third one, when you had me beta read it, you asked me to really look at the science and make sure I understood it. Because that was the first question you asked me when it got done was, did you understand the science? And I gave you feedback on that. But that's one thing I will say, for the most part, you do better than Michael Crichton, is that you take the idea of wormholes and nuclear bubbles and time and all that kind of stuff, and you break it down to someone like a layman like me can follow your train of thought.
I would definitely say that Michael Crichton is probably my favorite author. And I really drew some inspiration for how he incorporates real science into his stories, and I wanted to kind of mimic that, but that is the one thing that I wanted to strive to be different in making sure that the average reader can understand it. Because I know not everybody that reads my book is going to have a PhD in whatever field I'm focusing on for that book. But I really want to make sure that anybody who reads it can pick it up and be like, oh yeah, with my 6th grade education, I can understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So
I think you did a fantastic job. Is there a Michael Crichton book that's your favorite?
I really liked the Jurassic Park series.
I do too.
It was so different than the movies. And there were things in like the second and third one that you could see like, oh, that was supposed to really happen in the first one. But I guess the timing or the way they wrote the script for the movie, they had to take some things down, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the books a whole lot more than the movies.
Gotcha. So, after you finish the sci-fi with the spider or the bats, What do you have something that you want to write after that?
So I have lots of things that I've got in the works. One that I started, but I kind of struggled with was a historical fiction set in a time of Christ, where just some random guy finds some Roman soldier armor, and in the course of what's going on, like his path is put to defeat a demon that is threatening the family of Jesus as they're on the road. And in the course of saving Jesus and his family, Jesus blesses the soldier's armor, and that's where we get the story in the Bible where they talk about the different pieces of armor for God, and like the shield of truth and the sword of righteousness or whatever it is. And the fact is, like, the idea for that came from the Bible directly. I thought, well, what if it wasn't really just a metaphor? What if it was actually based off of something that actually happened?
Right.
So writing a story around how that armor became blessed and what the guy actually did with it. Like, I had this idea that he goes around fighting, ancient mythological creatures that we believe as being fictitious, but what happens if they were all real, like a Hydra or
that would be
a
so
Gorgon, like Medusa, or there's all kinds of rumors in the whole Middle East and Europe, and like there's things in Turkey I was going to have him go fight and kill. And that's how the Apostle Paul, who's in prison at the time, finds out about this guy with the armor, and that's how he writes about it in the Bible. It's like, so it was this whole big convoluted thing that, like,
I would read that though.
yeah, the problem with it is I got stuck on historical fact and trying to get everything right. And then, I kept spinning in circles, like, okay, but the average lifespan was only like 40 or 50. And me wanting to do it the way I want to do it, this guy would have to live till he's about 70 or 80. And it's like, that's not really true to that era. Like, I got hung up on a lot of the details. I kind of put it off to the side until I come back to it.
So what would you say to someone who is trying to write a book and they're doing the same thing that you are, like struggling to and circling the drain of trying to get the book out?
Well, first, every time you talk about somebody writing something, you have to stick with what you know. And if you don't know something, you have to step back from it and do some research and make sure everything's right and accurate and true. Now, unless you're doing something that's totally, fantasy, you can make up the rules as you go.
Sure.
You want to, remember that if you're not in love with it as writer, your reader's not going to be in love with it either.
Right.
And if you have to take a step back because, you get writer's block or you keep going in circles, sometimes take a day or two off or go back and reread the last couple pages, try and get your mind right and back into the story. Because, like, I've a couple times I've done it, like I'll get to a certain point and start scratching my head, like I don't know what to do next. Go back and read the last couple pages, and I realized that in the course of changing one or two words or
right
here or there, it totally changes the direction of the story.
Okay.
So take that out and go back, reread a couple pages, and you start fresh, and it's usually pretty easy to pick up from there.
Okay. You and I have talked very much about types of writing, and I think, was it Lloyd that coined the term for us, pantser or plotter, or was that you?
No, that was definitely Lloyd, and he will definitely not take credit for it and say that he can hear it from somebody else, which is fine. But the source of those definitions for me is always going to be Lloyd.
Yeah. So explain for those of us who don't know what that means. What is a pantser and what is a plotter with regards to writing?
Well, a plotter, simply put, is somebody who plots everything out. They figure out the arc of the story, the timeline, the characters. They have it all laid out in generalized terms before they actually start writing. And then a pantser is the complete opposite. I'm just going to start typing and see where the story takes me. It's a much more spur of the moment, follow your heart kind of thing. That for me, that's the only way to write a story. I tried plotting. I cannot do it to save my life.
Yeah.
But there's some people that they can't write without plotting things out, and that's fine. Everybody's got their own way of doing things.
Do you have a routine for how you're writing, like a space or things that you have to have? And I ask, like, because Misery is one of my favorite movies, because in that movie, James Caan, Scott Caan's the son, James Caan always drives to the hotel and he writes and he, has a glass of whiskey and all that kind of stuff. So do you have any routines for when you're writing?
No, I have my office at home. I generally need some quiet and to not be disturbed, because like anybody, when you're deep in thought on something and somebody, knocks on the door or you have to take a phone call, it breaks your train of thought. It just makes it hard to get back into it sometimes. But I don't typically have any routines. Not yet.
Yeah.
But no, I sit in my office, close the door, and just go to town.
Do you have a celebration that you do when you finish a book?
No, because usually by the time I'm typing the end and sending it out for beta readers or editing, like I'm already deep in thought in the next one, so it's almost a seamless transition between the current project and the next project, and there's never really an end for me.
Okay. Let's see. Trying to think what else that we can talk about today. What do you love about writing?
It's a chance for anybody to escape their reality. If you have a hard day at work, you can open up the book and you're instantly somewhere else. I guess that's more about reading than writing, but the idea as a writer that you can take somebody out of their reality and let them go somewhere else is just a wonderful idea. And like, we actually met somebody at my third book launch yesterday that absolutely giddy over getting to read the third one after just completely diving into the first and second one, and it was just phenomenal for me to see somebody that excited about being back in the story of leaving home series.
I love that series so much. I tell everybody about that series, and man, it's y'all need to get it. It's so good. So what are some of the books that you just like, you will die, that somebody will have to pry it from your cold dead hands? Like some of the books ever in your life that you've read that you really love.
I keep going back to my Luke Crichton. Like just about anything he's ever written, I've enjoyed. But I don't know that I have any book that I would not willingly share with somebody else.
Well, what I mean is like books that are like, they are on your bookcase and it doesn't matter, like that's the one you recommend to someone.
It's funny. I don't have the books that I enjoy the most. Like the ones that I've enjoyed the most in my life, I got from the library.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until really just a few years ago that I started keeping, buying books and keeping them on my shelf for me.
Really?
Yep. In the last 20 something years, being in the Army, every couple of years you're moving from place to place. It didn't make sense to accumulate weight.
Sure.
In the form of books, especially books I've read.
Right.
Because you can go to the library, read a book and take it back and you don't have to worry about, moving that extra weight everywhere you go. And now I'm retired. We're not moving anywhere else. We're hanging where we're at. So I can fill up some bookshelves.
You say that, but I've convinced all of them.
We're moving one more time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. But it's not as difficult a process as it was with the Army. There's some more logistics and timeline planning involved in it because the Army used to show up and just do it all for you. But I can, with moving now on my own terms as not Army, I can take my time. I can do it in stages. We can move a little bit here, a little bit there. We can move it by car every couple of weeks. We move a box down to our new apartment where my kids are going to be staying. I'm not rushed. I don't have to plan to do everything in the spur of like one weekend.
Yeah. So what did you do in the Army?
Communications. For the first couple of years, it was all about computers. Well, it was a little more convoluted than that, but we'll just say computers. As I rose through the ranks, it became more of management. Just supervisory kind of stuff, being in charge of a whole bunch of soldiers, and that's kind of where I ended in my career.
Okay. What was your favorite place to live?
So I was in Korea twice, and I really enjoyed it, mostly because of the food, I think. I just really like Korean food. But those are the hardest. Well, the first time I wasn't married, so that was super easy. I had a really good time. The second time was a little bit harder because I was away from my wife and kids. And I got stuck there because during COVID, so that wasn't too fun. But that was probably the most fun place I've ever been.
Why?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I have a lot of good memories from the first time I was in Korea before I got married. Young soldier in Korea, lots of friends.
Sure.
Going out drinking, having seeing the culture,
Yeah.
eating the food. And I just had a really good time there. But after I got married, like, I didn't want to go back
Yeah.
because most of the times, like, you go to Korea, you're going by yourself.
Sure.
And I don't know that I like really enjoyed any place that I lived because it was about the work and not really about like, oh, look where we're living. Like,
Yeah.
so much fun to be had here. It's like most of the military towns outside of the installation. Yeah, there's things to do, but it grows in such a way that the town itself is just a little too busy for me, and it's like it's not fun.
Yeah. So now that you don't have to move, all that kind of stuff, and you're buying books is there a book that, like, if you had unlimited resources, is there a book, like a first edition or something, that you would love to have?
Anything but Michael Crichton.
Anything new?
Yeah.
What would you say if you could ever meet him?
Oh, I mean, that's more of a conversation. I don't think I can limit it down to just one question.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit there and just pick his brain. Like, how do you come up with this? How did you figure this out? How, what was your inspiration for such and such? Like, it's one of those things. Like, there's so many good books that he's written, like even short ones like Terminal Man.
Oh, I so love that
Like,
one.
that's a short book, but like the idea for how he came up with that and how he developed the story is like, it's just, that's a conversation in and of itself, and that's a short book.
Did they make a movie of that?
Yes,
I feel like they did.
I did.
Okay. Is that the one with, who is that?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. It's funny too, because like I all these books by him, and I know some of them have been turned into movies. I only just found out that they made Terminal Man into a movie, I don't know, a month or two ago.
Oh, yeah. I just can't remember who's in it. Is there a book by Michael Crichton that hasn't been made into a movie that you would like to see made into a movie?
Probably. I haven't done a whole lot of research into what he's written that hasn't been in a movie, and I know some of them. Like I said, I just found out Terminal Man was made into a movie, and I didn't even know that. So I'm sure there's something he's written that hasn't been made into a movie, but off the top of my head, I can't think of something.
Are there any other authors that you really like to read?
I used to enjoy John Grisham. Specifically something like The Runaway Jury.
Oh, I love that book so much.
Yeah, that was like, I really enjoyed the twists in that. But like, I recently started, I think it was The Whistler I'm listening to.
I haven't read that one yet. It's on my list.
And I'm really having a hard time getting into it now. And like, I realize over the years, my tastes in literature have changed. And where I used to enjoy John Grisham and the what do you call it, the law aspect of his books, like, I'm struggling to get into The Whistler. And I don't know if because I no longer really enjoy the lawyer kind of drama that he specializes in, or if it's because my tastes have changed so much that I'm nitpicking dialogue. I'm nitpicking, how he describes a setting or a character. And just, I'm really having a hard time getting into the book because I'm like, it's just not doing it for me.
Do you think you would enjoy it more as an audiobook?
Well, and that I'm listening to.
Oh, okay.
But I know there's two components to every audiobook. You got the story that as it was written, but then you also have the narrator.
Yeah, that's what I was leading you to.
The narrator can change the entire tone of a book, like just listening to the words itself and separating the tone and how it's being read. Like, I'm struggling to enjoy the story.
You and I have talked about audiobooks before, how a narrator can make or break a book.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about Artemis and how we both really love Artemis, and no offense to Rosario Dawson, because we just adore her, but
she's an actor and conveys, there's a lot more to convey as a visual actor. Body language and the way you give somebody a look and the way you carry yourself when you walk into a room and walk out. And there's a lot to be said for that style of acting, but voice acting is something that's totally different. And I know it takes a lot of work and not everybody can do it, because like listening to another one of Andy Weir's book, Project Hail Mary. Specifically the one I don't know if there's another version narrated by somebody else, but like Ray Porter narrated the one.
So good.
And he is phenomenal at different voices and dialects, and like he was perfect in Project Hail Mary.
Well, I specifically listened to that because you talked about him and how he had narrated that book.
Yeah.
And so Will Patton is an actor that I really, really like. I had loved him forever. And so I was looking for an audiobook and he did The Outsider by Stephen King, which it wasn't on my bucket list to read, but I was like, okay, Will Patton's read it. I could listen to him read the phone book because he's got one of those Southern voices that just, and it was really interesting to listen to him read it. And it made, and the story was good, but you're right about having the right narrator because a narrator can absolutely make or break a book.
So did he do like different voices? Blogs? How well?
I think that he did pretty good because apparently The Outsider is a series and it's got this one character in it and I cannot think of what her name is right now, but she's I would almost say she's very minimal reaction, very smart, very just, this is what we're doing, not a whole lot of emotion. This is just what needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be a series that he's doing because on the title of the book, it has her name, a such and such series.
Yeah.
And so the book is about a murder that happens. And right out of the gate, they publicly arrest this guy that they think did it. And he ends up, something ends up happening. And right out of the first chapter, immediate, everything goes to hell very quickly. And so, but then with every Stephen King book, there's always some kind of component that's otherworldly or mystical.
A lot of it seems to be found out later.
Yeah. And and so there he does the voice. I mean, you can tell it's him doing the voices, but I did not mind it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like in some cases, you'll hear somebody do a voice and it's off.
Yes.
But I don't think I minded his, but it's because he has such a nice voice to listen to. But yeah, I agree with you on Ray Porter. After I got done listening to Project Hail Mary, I went in and I flagged all of Ray Porter's audio.
So we did that after we finished listening to Project Hail Mary. I went and looked through Audible to see what other books he's narrated. And I, for whatever reason, I struggle to think about listening to anything that's not a science fiction book. Like that's my go-to genre if I'm ever going to pick something up to read.
Sure.
And I found that Ray Porter had narrated another series called, the first book is called We Are Legion, but it's the Bobaverse book 1 through 4. And it is a pure science fiction book.
Sure.
But when you read the synopsis of the story, it's like, this sounds terrible. It's about an eccentric, rich guy that, in the 1990s or early 2000s, like he gets hit by a bus and dies.
Oh God.
And that's in the first chapter. And then after that, he comes back and he wakes up and he's like, hey, look at that, I lived. And come to find out he didn't live. He's been dead for like 200 years. And he woke up because like he invested in cryogenics or something like that. But he wakes up in futuristic America where religious wars have torn the country apart.
Sure.
And it's there's no longer a presidency. It's run by like the religious aspect of culture, and his consciousness has been extracted from his body in cryogenics to be reanimated as an artificial intelligence inside a computer.
Oh God.
So all these people that were in cryogenics are now artificial intelligences, and most of them can't handle it, and most of them go crazy and insane and kill themselves. So there's an integration process before they actually tell him, like, hey, you're a computer now.
Yeah.
And the goal was to train these different AIs to take control of spaceships that go out in deep space, and they give it a name. I don't remember what it's called, but like basically he's able to collect minerals from like asteroids and planets, melt them down into usable material, and the 3D printers that he has on board the spaceship, he uses to print new copies of himself. So like he's just creating copies of these computers and spaceships so he can send them out in every direction in the universe to settle new planets for human expansion into space. But because of a big nuclear war on Earth, there's like next to nobody left.
Sure.
They're finding, other AIs from other countries. He goes to war with them. He finds alien species that he helps them through, stages of evolution. It takes place over the series of hundreds of years.
Huh.
It's a really good, and it's 4 books, and Ray Porter does a phenomenal job. It's like, it's funny because he ends up with like 90 copies of himself by the third book, and they each choose different names for themselves so it doesn't get confusing.
Sure.
And Ray Porter comes up with a slight variation of each of these different versions of Bob, who's the main character, and like they all have different names.
Ooh.
They all have the same voice, but yet somehow Ray Porter comes up with a slightly different personality for each of them, so you can tell them apart. It's wonderful.
That's genius. So have you, speaking of AI, so that's become a new thing in the last couple of years with writing and that kind of stuff. Like, do you have any opinions about?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, everybody, it's a fairly polarizing subject. Everybody's usually on one side or the other. We shouldn't because of whatever, or we should because it makes everything better.
Sure.
Like the thing about AI, in my mind, is it's not really autonomous. It still relies on somebody to ask it to do something.
Mhm.
Most of the AI systems, like, it's just going to sit there and stare at you until you give it something to do.
Right.
It's not going to run off and like, I don't like humanity, I'm going to blow it all up, like with the Terminator franchise. Like, AIs that we know today, it's not just going to run off and do something of its own accord until we tell it to do something.
Ooh. But don't you think that someone who has ill intention can take AI and tell them to go do something?
Yeah, they could try. Having worked in computers and communications for my entire career in the Army, like, there's safeguards built into most systems. Like, there's firewalls, there's anti-hacking, intrusion countermeasures. There's all kinds of different things. Even if an AI were to try and gain control of government systems to launch nukes, like, those are usually self-contained systems. It's not like it could hack in and launch all the nukes at Russia or something like that. It's usually a completely separate system that, you have somebody sitting there waiting to push the button if somebody makes the phone call. Like, you can't really just hack in and take control without somebody knowing.
Well, it's just so funny to me because every single time, me, I love movies. I have an obscene amount of movie trivia knowledge.
Yeah.
And so every single time that, like, the news says, oh, well, we found this coffin in this sarcophagus in this thing, I just kind of want to go, there's a whole movie franchise about why that's a bad idea. Put it back.
Yeah, don't open that.
Yeah. Or, well, we learned how to clone, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole movie franchise about why that's a terrible idea. Stop trying to kill humanity. And just stop it. So that's funny that you say that about AI, because in your book, AI does almost become autonomous.
Yeah. Well, so in my book, the AI, he is completely autonomous. He has the ability to control the facility that he's in or any other facility that he's connected to that's on. But his primary purpose is there just to assist the people that are operating it. And he becomes he becomes an integral part of the main character's survival.
Yes, I love him.
And without his ability to do things autonomously, they never would have survived.
No. So if you could cast someone's voice for AI or for art, because I mean, that's strictly, there's nobody that would be a face for that. It would strictly be a voice.
I don't know if it's been done before, but I would love to see Ray Porter.
I knew you were going to say that.
There's other people that I could sit there and say, like, yeah, Morgan Freeman's got a great voice. I've met a guy named Bob Clark. He does a lot of voice for video games and animes and some other things. Like, he's got a really interesting voice. But I think having Ray Porter do that, like, he could find something that's interesting and unique, and exactly, like, they could even do face mapping him to get it to match. Like, I think that would be really cool.
I love his voice. It really is a good voice. So it makes me want to listen to stories that I probably never would have listened to had it not been for the fact that he's doing the voice.
Well, I know what would happen if they ever got to making my first book into a movie, and if they did like the second one, New Home. If they got Ray Porter to narrate art, you would be sitting there watching, oh my God, I love him.
I would.
And then if they, I know they'd cast somebody great for Mike and Gwen, and you'd be like, oh my God, I love him too. And that's all we would hear throughout the movie. And like, nobody would ever be able to go to the theater and watch it if Lindsay was sitting in the movie.
It's because I enjoy it when it comes to book reading.
I know.
Every time that Danny's watched a movie with me, he was like, oh my God, I love him. I can't help it.
I know. And then 5 minutes later, again and again. And it's fun.
Well,
that's why I only recommend watching things that I've already seen, because otherwise I'd never be able to see it.
So Adam, my husband, makes fun of me because we'll go see a movie that's been based on a book that I really love. And he has more than once said, the minute I hear you sigh and cross your arms, I know this isn't going well. Because we were watching it, it's like,
why did they change that?
That's not what he looks like.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of those people that when I read, I see it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what they look like. And literally my head will map exactly what's described.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of just think about, okay, that looks like so-and-so. And then I'll go watch the movie. He has blonde hair. Why did you make him a brunette? And that is not what he said.
Yeah.
Because I have this just weird ability. I can tell you like what two characters said on what page, in what chapter, and what the discussion was about in the book. And Adam is just, every time I try to tell Adam something, he'll kind of, come on, get to the point, because for me, everything is,
the whole book relates to, like, I'm going to tell you about one page, but I need to tell you about the entire thing and the two books that come after it, like, just to describe one page.
No, my mom always said that it was really hard to get me to write a book report because she kept trying to get me to like summarize. This only needs to be 3 pages. But then these two characters said this, and then this conversation caused this, and then she's like, that's not important. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So, and and you knew when I got a third book, you knew I was going to do that because you told me, I'm giving it to Lloyd for grammar. I'm giving it to you for emotion. And then all the text messages, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I've always been that way about books and movies.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if people did not get emotionally invested in books, like, we wouldn't have books.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And see, I don't loan books out like people anymore.
Yeah.
Because I don't break the spines and you keep them all nice and pretty. And, because I'm neurotic and weird.
Yep, that's fine.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and getting you on tape. Thank you for sitting here at 8 o'clock in the morning.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
Yeah. So you guys should absolutely go buy his Leaving Home series. The first one is Leaving Earth. The second one is New Home. And the third one is The Rift. And you can get it at our shop, thespineBookshop.com. Thank you so much. And happy reading.
Hey, to whoever may need this nugget of encouragement, things will be alright, so quit your worrying. I get it, the odds seem stacked back against the wall, but even consider it such, no, you'll stand tall.